Back in 2009, Land Rover sold 144,000 cars worldwide. In 2016, they sold 403,000 cars, which is almost a four-fold increase. Now, there's a reason they've increased their sales so much, and that's because people love crossovers and SUVs. But coming up right now, we're going to take this brand new Range Rover Velar off-road. I'm doing something that I bet you 99 out of 100 of you will never do, and that is actually take a Range Rover Velar off-road. And that's because this is not the kind of car that looks like it should go off-road. If you look at it, it looks like a concept car. It looks like something that just drove off the auto show floor, and it's kind of too precious, too beautiful, and I would even say sleek and stylish to hurt, damage, and take off-road. Design-wise, the Velar follows in the footsteps of the Evoque, its smaller and older brother. The Evoque was basically a concept car that was brought into production as is, and the same with the Velar. It is incredible that they were able to take a car that is so sexy, so sleek, so modern, and actually build it. And yet, it does have that Range Rover DNA. So the guys have set up a course near the Joshua Tree National Forest to show us just what this vehicle can do. And now, of course, off-roading has a lot to do with both mechanical and electronic ability. And this car certainly has the electronic ability. There's a full suite of different off-road modes, from basic auto mode, which lets the car decide what you should be doing, to sand, to snow, to even rock crawling. And perhaps the most important thing in making this car off-road worthy is the fact that it has air suspension. And of course, there are different models, and Range Rover has smartly given us the one with air suspension. So when this thing gets on its tippy toes, it gets 9.9 inches of ground clearance. Under the hood of the Velar, there are actually three engine choices, but this is a top-of-the-line V6. It's supercharged, it puts out 380 horsepower, and of course it's all-wheel drive paired to an 8-speed automatic transmission. There are also two other engine choices. There is a 4-cylinder diesel, and there is a 4-cylinder petrol, as the British would say, engine. But in general, what makes this such a unique vehicle is that there are no buttons. This is almost the exact opposite of a Porsche, where everything is hard buttoned. Here, for instance, you have rotary dials to control in this screen the temperature, but they of course serve a dual purpose. You can also use it to control the fan speed, and all your settings are up here. So for instance, there are the vehicle settings. Here's all the dynamic settings that you can choose. You can have, of course, your different drive modes: automatic, highway. This is sand, rock climbing. You can also change it to control your seats, and now of course this becomes your seat control, where of course this has heated and cooled seats, and of course massaging seats. This is sort of the new iPhone of cars. It's a car that anybody who's used a modern smartphone is going to be immediately familiar with. But if you're like my mom and you have a hard time with a push button start, I think that this very configurable screen is going to be an issue to people who perhaps are a little bit more hardwired and like their buttons to be real as opposed to virtual. In terms of the Velar in general, its sibling mate is the Jaguar F-Pace, so it's built basically on the same chassis and shares a lot of the same architecture. This is of course priced much higher. It starts at about $50,000, but I doubt you'll find one at that. Realistically, it'll be more like $60,000. And if you tick all the boxes, you're going to end up at a whopping $90,000. That's probably about $20,000 or $30,000 higher than the F-Pace, but they do share both a common architecture in terms of the chassis and a common engine choice. It's available currently at your local Land Rover, Range Rover dealership. And if you're confused about the fact that I keep calling it a Land Rover or a Range Rover, it's because of the way that Land Rover has structured its company. So Land Rover is the company, Range Rover is the product line, and in fact Land Rover has 3 product lines. There's the Range Rover, there's the Discovery series of vehicles, and hopefully soon there'll also be a Defender. The Velar is a bit of a tweener car. It falls in between a small crossover and a mid-size crossover, and even with this low and sexy roofline, it still manages to have 32 feet of cubic space behind the second row seat. There is a slight price to be paid for driving something so sexy and sleek. Now I am sitting behind myself. As you can tell, I have adequate headroom because this rear seat does recline, but legroom. Now keep in mind that I'm 6'2" and I would much rather be behind the steering wheel. I think this is a car that will appeal to anybody who loves the latest iPhone. It's just baked full of all kinds of cool gadgets and really interesting and stylish design cues. So if you're a modernist, then this is certainly a vehicle for you. And in a way it's very fitting because they've taken what the car is from the outside and moved it inside. So that kind of same sleek, modern look is also integrated into the general interior of this vehicle. Land Rover will say that it competes with cars like the BMW X4, but more importantly, it slots in somewhere between the Porsche Macan and the Porsche Cayenne. So that's what Land Rover thinks that it will compete with. And if you think about those cars, you know, one's kind of a mid-size, smallish crossover, and this is kind of in that same space. And if you're used to having that kind of Range Rover high driving position, that commanding position, this vehicle doesn't have it. This is more of a high collared, you sit in the vehicle as opposed to sitting on top of the vehicle. In my mind, a car's off-road worthiness directly correlates to price and how old it is. In other words, the cheaper and older it is, like a Civic, the more off-road worthy it is. So when you're looking at a car that costs $91,000, even though it can go off-road, I don't think a lot of people will take it off-road. Will you? As always, this is Roman reporting for the Fast Lane Car. Check out tflcar.com for more news, views, and of course, real world $91,000 Range Rover Velar off-road reviews. See you guys next time. Ciao.